Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I just want to thank you all for joining today. In our session, we're going to be talking about navigating nonprofit jobs. I am Angie Herman, and I am the River Training Center for River Management Society, and I'm going to be helping facilitate today's discussion. So we're going to be looking at some of the nonprofit job opportunities that revolve around rivers. And this is just a small sampling of, there's so many different types of nonprofit jobs related to rivers out there. And our panelists today are going to shed some light on their experiences and share some insights and a little bit about their journey in working in nonprofit sector. And again, this session is awesome. It's great for students or early career professionals who are seeking to learn more about what kind of nonprofit jobs are out there. So really encourage you to be involved today. You can ask some questions and I'll explain how to do that in a minute, but you can do that through Menti. You can also do it through Zoom here in the chat box. So just a real quick little spiel about River Management Society for those who might not be familiar. But River Management Society is a membership organization that supports professionals and students who study, protect, and manage North America's rivers. So we have a student membership. I just like to highlight that's at a discounted rate. And it's a really great way for students to start learning about some of the job opportunities out there through our biweekly news digest. We also have discounts for training, opportunities to join chapter trips, which are really affordable trips, and you get to network like crazy. So a lot of really cool opportunities out there for students. So head on over to river-management.org to check out more about that. All right, so just real quick, a little bit about today's agenda. Here in a minute, we're gonna have all of our panelists introduce themselves. Then we're gonna have some discussion. We've got some questions that we'll be asking the panelists, but we'll also have time for Q&A from all of you. So feel free, again, to ask any questions through Mentimeter if you'd like. You're also welcome to ask them in Zoom. I believe if you ask them through Mentimeter, they're anonymous. So if that is helpful to you. So we'll have time for Q&A, and then I'll just give a quick little spiel about our next session coming up on November 29th. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to each of the panelists to introduce themselves. We'll just go down this list here and start with Chris.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Geden. I work with River City Outdoors. I've spent pretty much most of my entire career working in the nonprofit sector. This is my first actual job where I get to spend a lot of time outdoors and even better on the rivers.
Thanks, Chris. How about Orion?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. And thanks, Angie, for putting this on. Very excited to be here. Congratulations to you all on what sounds like exciting and productive summers with a lot going on. My name's Orion Hatch, like I said, and I represent an organization called the Snake River Fund. We're a little nonprofit based out of Jackson Hole, and we have a dedicated mission to promoting public access to and stewardship of the Snake River and its headwater tributaries. So look forward to expanding on that a little bit more. Thanks.
Thanks, Orion. Jack.
Hey, folks. So my name is Jack Henderson. I'm here in Asheville, North Carolina, western part of the state. And I work actually across a few different organizations, but focused on the French Broad Paddle Trail. And the French Broad Paddle Trail programming, works to create, maintain, and improve public access areas, campsites along the river, stewardship, managing fallen trees and garbage and things like that, but also signage and information and events that focus on celebrating and learning about the river. So on any given day, writing grants or doing on-site stewardship or working with engineers and kind of span the whole spectrum of tasks here on the French Broad. And French Broad itself is a 140-mile section of river between Rosman, North Carolina, and Douglas Lake, Tennessee. And we work across all 5 counties within that span.
Thanks, Jack. Herman.
Very cool, Jack. In a very similar vein of work here on the Rouge River and the Rouge Watershed with the work that we're doing. We're working to establish a 29-mile water trail on the Lower Rouge. This is Michigan's most urban watershed. We're talking about 43 municipalities across 3 counties. And yeah, it's a very exciting proposition. As it stands now, there were currently no universally accessible launches on the Rouge. So my role is to do all the due diligence, whether it's writing grants, working with all of our local municipalities, nonprofit community partners, to having a host of events, meeting people where they are to spread the goodwill about and the community and health benefits of paddling.
Thanks, Herman. And Kristina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristina Rylands, and I'm with the Upper Merced River Watershed Council here in Central California. Our organization works with the 3 federal land management agencies that are responsible for managing the Merced Wild and Scenic River, which starts in the headwaters of Yosemite National Park and flows for 122 miles. The Merced River ultimately meets up with, it's one of the major downstream tributaries in California, the San Joaquin, which then flows out to San Francisco Bay and under the Golden Gate Bridge. And so our organization is a very small nonprofit, and we work to support our federal partners as well as rally the community around education, stewardship, and just collaboration to help support our federal partners in protecting and enhancing the Merced Wild and Scenic River. I've been doing nonprofit work for off and on in my career for a while, and I'm really excited about this conversation.
Thanks, Kristina. And yeah, thanks to all the panelists for joining today. I'm excited for today's conversation. So we're going to just kind of dive into it. And my first question here, first I'm going to go to Orion here, but what are some of the unique opportunities that nonprofit organizations offer for individuals looking to focus on river conservation or other river-related work?
Thanks, Angie. Yeah, I'm excited to tackle this one first. So some of the other panelists kind of touched on how I'm going to answer that. And that is the ability to work with so many diverse groups as a representative of a nonprofit. So on any given day, I might be working with federal agencies or state agencies or, local county and town agencies to accomplish goals or move projects forward. And of course, we work with many, many different like-minded nonprofit organizations. So I would say that that's just something that's unique and really a huge benefit for working in the nonprofit sector. First of all, it keeps things diverse. It allows me to familiarize myself with a lot of different processes and sort of the management paradigms of different agencies kind of across the board. And it keeps things diverse and exciting. No 2 days are the same. And that's something I really value in my work with the Snake River Fund. And it sort of prevents me from feeling pigeonholed in whatever it is I'm doing. I'm able to work across a lot of different sectors, and that kind of lends itself to a lot of personal and professional growth. So that's what I would say is one of the unique opportunities of working with the NGO sector. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Orion. I agree. Just having that, like, kind of every day is different, and there's so many different ways that can look. Kristina, I'm curious if you have anything to add on this.
Sure. They often say that a lot of nonprofits, particularly those that work in natural resources, you get paid in sunsets. I think it's I'll be honest, there aren't great opportunities to make millions of dollars in the nonprofit sector, but it's really rewarding work. And one of the things that I'll say that I've really appreciated about working in this particular sector, and I've been in the education world, I've been in the federal government world, but working in the nonprofit world really allows me to channel my passions. And so if there's something that you're really passionate about, that you really care about, that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about working in the nonprofit sector. Every single day, I'm helping my organization move the mission forward, and being able to take the things that I'm most passionate about. And thank you, Angie, for putting a picture of the Merced Wild and Scenic River in the background of this slide. This is Yosemite Valley, which is part of our mission of what we're out to protect. It's really rewarding work, and sometimes it's challenging and difficult work, but I often find that ability to kind of constantly touch base with my own personal core values is something that really fuels my enjoyment of whatever it is that I'm doing. So I think that ability to channel your passions is something that's fairly unique in the nonprofit sector. There are organizations out there with people, like-minded folks that really want to rally around a particular cause. And that's really energizing to be able to work with teams of people that feel the same way you do and want to advance the mission of an organization.
Well, that kind of leads me to the next one. Kristina, you mentioned that there can be some challenges. And so, Jack, I'm going to go to you first on this one, but what are some of the challenges that professionals encounter, when working in nonprofit organizations dedicated to river conservation? And then how can individuals navigate these challenges and still find fulfillment in their careers while making a positive impact?
Sure, thanks, Angie. And I guess one thing I didn't really do when I first introduced myself and what I work on are the actual nonprofits that I work with. And so the French Broad Paddle Trail program is kind of housed within the French Broad Riverkeeper program, which is kind of split between two nonprofits here in Western North Carolina, one of which is RiverLink, which is kind of dedicated to the economic and environmental vitality of the French Broad specifically. They do a lot of like educational programming. They're a land trust. They protect property in the floodway. And they also do quite a bit surrounding water quality from like a stormwater perspective. The other nonprofit is Mountain True, and Mountain True champions resilient forests, clean waters, and healthy communities all across the Southern Blue Ridge. So much larger geographical footprint, kind of more of an advocacy angle, but both are really productive organizations that focus on the French Broad as a program. So the paddle trail program within that is kind of all things recreation on the French Broad itself. So just to kind of put that more into context, I think that's helpful from a nonprofit perspective. The team I work on, there's 3 of us. The organization wide is about 26 people in Mountain True and 5 in RiverLink. And the French Broad Riverkeeper program is 3 folks entirely focused on the French Broad itself. So in terms of challenges, and I think a lot of this will be consistent across other nonprofits too, but funding overall. I mean, I think most of us are familiar with the opportunities and the challenges around writing grant funds, seeking donations, finding creative opportunities for cost share agreements with other natural resource managers, kind of always on the lookout for funding to do your work. And depending on the size of your organization you're working for, you might have a dedicated staff member or a team focused on development specifically, which is really nice, to have someone that's kind of always going to bat for you and your work, whether that's your salary or your budget for materials, stewardship, et cetera, or in a lot of smaller nonprofits or particular programs, you are doing a lot of that work yourself. And a lot of that depends on your interest for such, your ability to do so, success and opportunities for funding within your region, etc. So I would say a challenge is just kind of having to always more or less have an eye out for that, unless you're fortunate to be with an organization big enough that just, is well funded enough on an annual basis where it doesn't really get down to the program level if that's where you're working. That said, though, if you yourself are a really good fundraiser, if you're a good grant writer or speaking with donors, things like that, that is a really important aspect of river managing nonprofits, even if it's not from the natural resource angle. So it's a really good thing to bring to the table if you have it in terms of resume writing and things like that. So challenges, funding overall. I would say on the other end of the spectrum, oftentimes working in less than ideal conditions. I mean, a lot of us are out there in the field, in the river, which sounds awesome, and it usually is, unless it's 35 degrees and raining and you're working to fish some, vehicle out of the river that fell off a bridge or something like that, and everyone's fine, but there's all this trash and there's this environmental impact now and things like that. Or if you're like me and you manage paddle trail campsites, you're cleaning bathrooms, you're picking up cattle, droppings, and you're picking up trash and things like that. And all of this, is within balance. And I personally really love the balance of having a part clerical job where you're at the computer a lot, but also a lot of physical on time, physical on ground stewardship work too. But that can be a challenge sometimes, where that might be that day where you just don't want to go outside, it's really bad weather, but you have stuff to do and you just need to go for it. So in terms of how individuals can navigate this, I would say just building capacity into every grant. It's really important. It's really nice to ensure that your time is covered, even if the nature of the funding you're going after is focused around equipment or stewardship or a project, passed through to a contractor. Always building in capacity into that's really important. Just make sure that your time and your kind of organizational overhead is covered whenever possible. And otherwise, in terms of fundraising, so always keeping an eye out for opportunities. Like whenever I go into local businesses or talk to partners or other folks, I'm always asking like, hey, what about our mission interests you? Or like, what opportunities do you have for funding nonprofits? Like, I'd love to talk to you more about what opportunities there are to fund our nonprofit, and just kind of being conversational around that, even if it's not always successful in terms of getting money right away. It can kind of plant the seed for future stewardship or future fundraising and things like that. And then in terms of the latter challenge I mentioned, in terms of being prepared for the field, just be prepared. I mean, just learning to invest in what kind of clothing and equipment you need, building that into your budget, kind of building an optimism around spending time in the field is really important. And I think a lot of folks going to river management kind of already have that, but it's nice to be realistic with yourself about kind of what your capacity is for bad weather and time outside and kind of doing dirty and challenging things and stuff like that. So those are my two challenges and ways to mitigate them.
Thanks, Jack. Chris, I'm curious your perspective on some of the challenges and ways that people can navigate them.
Sure. I think, so just to be crystal clear, I do programs with youth outdoors. So rivers, lakes, camping, all that stuff. It still relates. I think one of for St. Louis in particular, the thought of getting kids out with intention, getting specific kids out, underserved kids, was a bit challenging because you have to deal with school districts and other nonprofits who have certain policies. And anytime you bring up water and children, people, oh, that's not safe, especially with rivers. So really being able to explain ourselves and making sure that they understand that they're going with trained guides on the rivers, and dispelling a lot of the myths that we have surrounding the Mississippi River here in St. Louis. To answer, I think so. That's one challenge, and then I think explaining to people exactly what it is that we're doing, and I think being intentional and being open and saying, hey, we want to see more BIPOC and LGBTQ youth and adults enjoying the outdoors. Because many not-for-profits, while they say, yes, we are diverse, we celebrate diversity, you can take a look at their board of directors and that's not so. So that's a real challenge, because at River City Outdoors, we'll say, hey, we're going to do A, B, and C, and this is why we're going to do it. And if you're not ready for that, then I can't. Well, the conversation is often over. So I think people talk about celebrating diversity, but I think when actually walking the walk and taking a look at, who's making the calls and who's really doing the work, that can be challenging. And just to mitigate that is, I think we continue to do what we do, regardless of what everybody else is doing. It's not always about being popular. It's really about empathy. One of the beauties of working in the nonprofit space, I'm actually not in my office. I'm at a local YMCA because I had a 1:00 meeting and there was no way I was going to be able to get back into my office in time. Now, the person's office who I'm in does not know that I'm in his office. So when he comes through the door, you may see some rustling and some other action. But that's the beauty of working with other non-for-profits. You're able to kind of share space and really work closely together. I think that's all.
Thanks, Chris. And Kristina, I'm curious if you had anything to add on this one.
Well, I think the whole discussion about funding has been mentioned, and one of the things that I think is important to be aware of that from a professional perspective. If you go to work for a nonprofit, quite often, funding cycles come and go, and nonprofits have to be really nimble in terms of seeking funding that will help meet the objectives of the organization. Sometimes some of the pitfalls are organizations that follow the money, and then the tail starts wagging the dog of the organization. And so that's a particular pitfall. And sometimes you can have foundations or a state agency where you're used to going, the organization is used to going to that source of funding time and time again. And then suddenly the foundation or the state agency changes their funding priorities, and it doesn't fit with the priorities of your organization anymore. And so I think having an awareness, if you go into the nonprofit sector, that can be the case, I think is really important. And ways to mitigate that, I think when you can become an employee of a nonprofit organization that can be nimble and flexible within that, and really diversify your skill set so that if priorities change, you can change with that and still have something really solid and to offer the organization. I think that ability to be flexible, that ability to understand that if you're in a particular role within a nonprofit, you may not be in that same role for the entirety of your career or for the next 10 years. But that ability to shift with the organization, if you want to stay with that organization as funding priorities change, I think is really important if you're thinking about going into nonprofit work.
Thanks, Kristina. So this next one, I'm going to start with you, Herman. It asks, are there specific skills or qualifications that are highly sought after by nonprofit organizations in the fields of river conservation or management? And how can individuals develop and demonstrate these skills to enhance their career opportunities?
Sure. Well, thanks for that, Angie. This might be a little bit of a surprise, maybe a left turn for you guys, but I think nonprofits in the field need you to be you and bring the diversity of thought and skill sets that you bring to the table. Be genuinely you and consider how those skill sets translate into the field of river conservation or management that you're pursuing. And I offer that perspective because I'm not a career environmentalist. I am an eternal novice at anything outdoors. I confess. I come from the world of sports and entertainment. I worked for the Detroit Tigers for 7 years right out of college, and in building player and community relations programs, and ultimately on the construction of Comerica Park. I left that and started my own company doing digital content production. The emphasis was on branding, corporate citizenship. When I learned this opportunity with Friends of the Rouge, I'm like, wow, how can I, best mold the skills and experience that I've garnered throughout my professional career to enhance that opportunity and be successful. And yeah, I've had to grow out of my comfort zone and learn some new things, which required a bit of an adventurous spirit. Opening log jams in the middle of the Rouge River and practicing tea rescues in the Detroit River. That was never my idea of a day at the office, but I've really grown to enjoy it actually. Every day is like living inside of a Discovery Channel series episode, and there's so much more to learn. CPR, first aid, wilderness first responder training. Aspiring to be a certified paddling instructor. These are all things that I have learned or aspire to learn. But nobody had to teach me how to build, market, and develop a program. Or how to actively engage community, the business community, civic relationships that I'd already built and established, how to write and manage grants. These are skills that I brought with me. So I would just say, be you and have an open mind and a ready spirit to learn.
I love that answer. Thanks, Herman. How about Orion? Do you have anything to add to this one?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what I wanted to say echoes exactly what Herman just brought up. I think you have some great points, man. It's really important. And I think it's important to understand that, like, if we gave you a list of skills that would benefit you in the nonprofit sector, it's never going to be exhaustive, right? And this sort of touches a little bit on that first question that we got asked about, what's unique to the nonprofit world. And I think one of the things that it helps to know is, like, you could have so many different skills that would allow you to further the mission of whatever organization you want to join. If you're really good with numbers, you have financial acumen, you could help with budget building. If you're a people person, you can get into the fundraising side of it. If you're you see where I'm going with it. It's like, if you have legislative or legal knowledge, you can really get into whatever it is you want to get into. You're good at throwing parties, get into program, management. So basically, I would say being you, as Herman said, is huge. I mean, that resonates with me. I have a baccalaureate in geology, and then I was a river bum for 10 years, and I followed my passion, and now I find myself as the executive director of a small nonprofit, and I worked hard for it, but I was also able just to kind of leverage my passion and help me channel my energy into giving back to the resource that's kind of given so much to me. So as far as like a specific, though, I will say whenever I'm doing like hiring, something that helps folks rise to the top for me is just like any example of, say, like project execution. If an individual is able to dream up a project and pursue it and execute, I think that there's something to be said for that. And it always shows me that individual can be passionate and creative and focused and disciplined, and all of those are really valuable traits in the NGO world. And as far as like being effective once you get into this sector, I thought it would be important to just emphasize how important like people skills and what Chris said earlier about empathy. I mean, it just goes so far. Like, if you're able to meet somebody where they're at, it enables you to get so much more work done. It enables you to get better work done. I can't even express how many times I've seen personalities clash and blow up projects. And on on the other side of that, you're like, being empathetic and meeting somebody where they're at has been able to like build bridges over these seemingly insurmountable voids. So work on that. Your people skills, just being empathetic, is going to allow you to be really effective in whatever position you happen to get.
Yep.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Orion. How about Jack? Do you have anything to add to this one?
Oh, not a whole lot. I'll toss a couple things in, but I really appreciate everything that Herman and Orion said, because they're spot on. I mean, I can just say from my perspective, in the natural resource management field specifically, a lot of these things are probably well known, but if you're in school or you have the ability to take classes for kind of like tangible, specific things that are just kind of helpful oftentimes in this work, I would put a plug-in for GIS, whether that's Esri and ArcMap software, or if it's just open source like QGIS. Oftentimes, a lot of nonprofits are pretty small programs. In like a government agency, you might have 3 or 4 GIS technicians, or surveyors or kind of map people on staff. In a nonprofit, oftentimes, you might have a staff member who's half of their time is dedicated to that work. And if you can bring that skill set to a nonprofit that doesn't already have it, it's really helpful. And GIS is not just making maps; it's the ability to look up property ownership or water quality data or kind of all things. So I always put a plug in for that. That was my undergraduate major. I've definitely been using it less, now than as a full-on major, but it's been a really helpful tool in my work. Another thing I would say is like, if you're aiming to work for, or you find yourself working for a nonprofit that has a pretty hyper local focus, like a Watershed, or a particular section of river, like getting to know that section and that geography has been for me and people that I work with incredibly helpful. Having, a passion for that particular region and the people and the flora and fauna within it, I think goes a long ways in terms of eligibility to be hired, but also just kind of working in that space. If you're working with partners and you know little bits and pieces about a place that they care about, that goes a long way in building those kind of interpersonal relationships and skills and things like that. So I would say just developing, an authentic, but deep knowledge of the place you're working in, if that's relevant. A lot of nonprofits work holistically across the country, or further than that, and it's not realistic to know, every single thing. But for me in the French Broad, like I'm always just interested in learning more and more and more about the watershed, even if the knowledge of it is not necessarily pertinent to what I do. So those are the two that I'd like to add. But I think to Ryan's point, you could have an exhaustive list of tangible traits, which is why I think it's important to think about that. But overall, just being willing to learn and willing to work with people is super important.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jack. All right, so this next question, I'm going to go first to Chris. But it asks, how can individuals stay updated on the latest developments, trends, and best practices in the field of river conservation and management, or working with rivers? And are there resources, conferences, or networks that they should be aware of?
Okay. Thank you for the question. I just wanted to say, Orion, leverage your passion. I wrote it down. I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm going to say it 10 times every day for the next 3 weeks because I love to hear it so much. In all seriousness, I think I'm going to go further out. I think this staying updated in our field and knowing what's going on is for any field. You need to have an idea of what the changes are, because as we know, things change in a blink of an eye. But I just spent the last weekend with RMS. And not only was it a wealth of knowledge collected in the room, I forget how many years of knowledge were in there. I think Risa had said it, but just doing things like that. It could be, I was also at the HBCU climate change conference, a program guy at a climate change conference. But being able to network and meet these people who have way, way different skill sets, probably a lot smarter than I am. But you're able to build those relationships, which is really, at the end of the day, is a big part of what nonprofit work is building on relationships. So my suggestion is if, we were talking in Oklahoma and we were talking about the budget, and I said training and development or leadership development, or when you're, as you build your budget out, I think conferences are important, trainings are important, and it's not just the content. I had a great time at Oklahoma because of the people, because of the relationships that were built and will continue, hopefully, long into the future. So it's okay to travel for work and have a good time. I think people assume I've got to stay on subject matter. We've got to talk about rivers for 3 days. We didn't talk about rivers for 3 days. We did try to solve some of the world's problems. Um, so yeah, I think paying attention. I think most of us, or at least the people that I know on this call, are pretty plugged in, and it's honest to God, it's just simply a Google search of I could plug in Parks and Rec and find 3 conferences. So it's out there, and as a supervisor, or if you are a supervisor trying to help develop your staff, I think it's critical in career growth and leadership development is those opportunities. So yeah, that's what I would say. If you really if you really again want to leverage your passion, you're going to continue to learn. You're going to feed that passion, and that's how we move our nonprofits forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Herman, do you have anything to add on this one?
Sure. Yeah, I would say, Angie, that and Chris, thank you for your comments. The resource organizations like River Management Society, obviously River Network, Rails to Trails, great resources, just to kind of stay up to speed on some of the best practices. They offer some great webinars that can, just become great learning tools. And Chris is spot on, hey, attend an industry conference. Healing Our Waters is a great one. I just actually attended that one, was hosted in Cleveland, and presented at that conference. River Rally is going to be in Michigan next year in Grand Rapids. But your local or national brownfields conferences are good resources. But network locally in your community, with the organizations that are impacting this work. I just think that those could be key opportunities to, making some segues and building relationships.
Thanks, Herman. And I'm just going to put in a plug. River Management Society has a symposium that's held every other year, and we had one recently in February. So our next one is going to be at the end of April in 2025. Yes, 2025. So put that on your calendar. It's an awesome opportunity for students and early career professionals to network, to present, or just to go and learn from others. It's got, I think last year we had a couple students walk away with job offers, and some did interviews. So a really, really good spot to just get to know people and opportunities that are out there.
So that's San Antonio?
The next one, it's going to be in Ashland, Oregon. So different location. It'll be April 29th through May 1st, I believe. So yeah, put that on your calendars. So this last question, I'm going to ask each of the presenters, and so you can all kind of brainstorm your responses. But I know a lot of advice has been shared today, and just kind of what final advice would you give to individuals who are passionate about rivers or working with people on rivers, and want to pursue a career in the nonprofit sector? And then any other specific steps to gain relevant experience or to stand out? How about, let's start with Kristina.
Thanks for that question. So much has been discussed already that I think is just fantastic advice. I think this may be touching on one of the last questions, but I put something in the chat about, things that will help you stand out on your resume in the nonprofit sector are things like ability to work in a team or to lead teams. Teamwork is huge working in the nonprofit sector. Really, it's important for any sector you work in, but in particular, that ability to work in a team is super important. That ability to build relationships, to build partnerships, and to be part of those. I think is also, relationships, partnerships, putting those words in your resume. And, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is board involvement. And so nonprofits can't work without a board of directors. And I think in terms of steps that you can take to gain some relevant experience, join a nonprofit board. A lot of nonprofit boards in particular are looking for young people, for new perspectives, diverse perspectives to help move a mission forward. So if you really want to challenge your passion, join a board. My organization is always on the lookout for passionate people who care about what we do, who care about our work, that would like to join our board. And I think it's a great way, first of all, it's a great resume builder. And it's a great way to kind of really get to see the inner workings of a nonprofit without maybe necessarily having a job within a nonprofit. I mean, largely boards are volunteer based, but most boards are looking for people to help out in a variety of capacities. I'm going to put in a plug for the RMS board because, if you're a part of the River Management Society, there are so many opportunities to be a chapter officer, and that chapter officer role really gives you a foothold into not only the inner workings of how the River Management Society works, but it allows you to do all these things that we've been talking about, all to network with other river professionals. Chris came to a board meeting just this last week as a member of RMS and engaged with the board and had a lot to offer at our board meeting. So find out what board meetings are taking place in areas that are of interest to you, and invite yourself, or ask to be invited to participate and have your voice be heard, because a lot of nonprofits, they are inclusivity and diversity of perspective are really becoming pillars of the nonprofit sector. And so there are opportunities today, unlike any time before, to have your voice be heard and to participate and learn more about how nonprofits actually function. So that's my advice. Go join a board. And if you're interested, check me out. Because we're building our board. RMS, like I said, we're always looking for people to become officers. So there are lots of opportunities. So just seek them out. That's all I got.
Thanks, Kristina. That was great. And how about Chris? Any final advice to share?
I think I would just go back to my stolen new favorite phrase, leverage your passion. I think that whether it be rivers or lakes or streams, or indoors, I think the beauty of working in the nonprofit sector is that if you start your career there, it can be easily maintained and fed to a point of where it's not like going to work anymore. I mean, it's just not. And I think, all these things that we do, like we paddled a ton when we were in Oklahoma. That's a skill builder. As I was in the water quite a bit, so I haven't acquired that skill just yet. But I just think a nonprofit provides an opportunity for real growth and to truly be happy with your job and your work. So many people go to their jobs and cannot stand it and hate it, and mental health issues, all that stuff. I'm sure I've worked for nonprofits that I wasn't happy with all the time, but being able to come to work every single day and it doesn't feel like work, I think that's one of the best feelings. And I just can't. I don't think that people who are in the private sector get to be happy and wake up, yep, going to work, I can't wait to get there. I think that's one of the things of working for non-for-profits and working for and with people. Thank you, Ange.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Jack, what's your final advice that you would like to
Yeah, I'll be brief and specific just because this is something that's really worked out well for me over the course of time, getting into the job I'm in now and other jobs I've done. I would say to the extent you have the capacity to do so, volunteer. If there's an organization or an individual that you're specifically interested in learning more about what they do or the organization does, particular projects, etc., offer to volunteer. And I would add to that specifically, offer to volunteer, especially if you're comfortable or able to work somewhat independently. And the reason why I say that is because, a lot of organizations, love to have volunteers, but back to capacity, it can be hard sometimes, to manage a volunteer. And sometimes so people that have that time. So I'm not saying that, you should try to just work independently from the start, but if you can come in with like hey, like I noticed that you and your organization are working on this project and I love that project and I would love to research this or do the map of this or, learn more about this and I can take it on myself and do it unpaid. That's awesome. Like I would love to have that person involved in my program, in terms of their help and maybe future job. And also it's just a way to have a more tangible project under your belt. Back to Orion's point of having something completed, it doesn't have to be a job. I mean, ideally that'd be awesome if it was, but even if it's a volunteer thing or a personal thing, that's really great. And so this is just one of many pieces of advice, you could take from this. That's just one that served me well from a finding job perspective, but also from a hosting interested parties perspective too.
Thanks, Jack. How about Herman? Your final advice. You are muted, Herman. Oh.
I would say I would echo what Jack was saying. When we review candidates for positions within our organization, we often ask, how good are they with the canvas or the lump of clay? And that's to say, what have they painted and, what can they sculpt? What are they actually able to create and do? So having that, on your resume, I think is excellent. And again, echoing Jack, volunteering is a great way to do that. There are so many opportunities to learn the work, and at the same time learn where you can best impact the mission, and find your place by doing. So that would be the final piece that I would offer.
Thanks, Herman. And then lastly, Orion, what's your final advice that you'd like to share?
You guys stole all mine. No, this has been great, y'all. I will say two things that I think might be important to keep in mind. One is that depending on what stats you look at, the nonprofit sector has anywhere between 5 and 20% more turnover than the private sector. And that shouldn't be looked upon negatively, but as an opportunity for you as you think about applying for jobs. I think it's a function of something that Kristina alluded to, which is just that folks often move up within organizations or use local organizations as stepping stones to do more regional or national or even international work to take their work to the next step. So if you are applying for a job with an organization and you don't get it in the first round, just don't be discouraged. Look at that as an opportunity to do things like the other panelists talked about, volunteer, stay engaged with that organization. And there's a chance that that position may open up in just a couple of years. And if I'm looking at a stack of resumes and I see, wow, this person applied for the same position or a similar position 2 years ago, they stayed engaged with the organization. Clearly they're passionate, and that's something that I'm going to look super favorably upon. So keep that in mind. Don't get discouraged if round one doesn't work out. Keep trying, and it'll really improve your chances of finding your dream job. And also, I would say just use whatever resources you have and connections you have. I'd say, Angie, if you want to share my contact with any of the folks on this call, like that's great. I can't promise you a job, but if you want to ask any questions, like just feel free. If you have my email, write me. I'm happy to share any of my experiences or anything that might help you on your path. It's an exciting time in a lot of your lives as you move on from school and start thinking about building your career and your professional and personal lives. So stay excited, channel that excitement, and that's what I got. I'll get off the soapbox now.
No, that is great. Great final advice. And we do have a few minutes for questions now. Let's see, you can put those into the Mentimeter. You can also just put them into the Zoom chat and ask that way. So we do have one that came in. It says, I have the perception that most nonprofit river jobs are hiking or community engagement based, not scientific. Is this true? And what are your suggestions for one who wants to be nonprofit, but do more science background type stuff? Yeah, Jack.
I can just be real brief. Yeah, so the program I work for houses the French Broad Riverkeeper program, and Riverkeeper is part of Waterkeeper Alliance, which focuses on fishable, drinkable, and swimmable rivers. And so while they do focus on recreation, I would say the vast majority of my coworkers' focus is on science through the lens of water quality. We run bacteria sampling programs, all kinds of chemical parameters. We follow up with pollution sources to remedy them. It's kind of all across the spectrum, but it's heavily rooted in science. So quite a bit of that through the kind of Riverkeeper, Waterkeeper program. And they have a job board. I think it's waterkeeperalliance.org.
Our organization is the same. We have an entire monitoring and restoration program, both separate programs within Friends of the Rouge. Our restoration team deals mainly with removal of invasive species, habitat restoration, bank stabilization projects. I mean, it's pretty intense. They have a team of landscape architects on their team, and then our monitoring department is equally robust on the work that they do. Monitoring sampling the water quality of the Rouge and all its 4 tributaries. So it's definitely rooted in science. So there are many opportunities outside of just hiking and being on trails outdoors.
Thanks. I saw another question come in the Zoom chat that says, thanks for speaking with us. My question is, what has your experience been with professional development? Do you feel that being in the nonprofit world limits resources that might contribute to this side of your career? Anyone want to take this one?
I can just say no. I mean, different nonprofits have different budgets. That's one thing you can definitely and should definitely ask about in a prospective interview of, what types of opportunities they offer. Are there local conferences versus further away conferences, trainings, etc. The nonprofit I work for definitely values that. And even though we're not paid a ton of money, they definitely offer quite a big budget as possible for professional development in terms of conferences, trainings, etc. So depends on the nonprofit, but it's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, from my own personal experience and some of the nonprofit jobs that I've had, is there's been like discounts for some training if I'm with a nonprofit. And so asking about something like that can be helpful. And even like one organization, I think I did a work trade. Instead of paying their conference fee, I volunteered at their conference and just like helped man like a registration table for a few hours and was able to go for free. So seeking out opportunities like that as well, and just asking, doesn't hurt to ask if things like that exist for something that you're interested in. Well, anyone has any final questions, you can put them in, but I just want to highlight, I've mentioned this in the last couple of calls, but this is just a QR code to a mentorship interest form. We're looking at doing some sort of mentorship program for students and early career professionals. And this is not indicating that you're signing up. This is just to help us build out this program. So if you're interested, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how much time would you be willing to commit and what are you looking to get out of it? And so hopefully in the next year, this would be something that we'd be offering in the spring. But if you're interested or might be interested, I encourage you to fill out this survey. Also, our last session in this series is going to be on November 29th. And we're going to be looking at some private sector pathways. We've got some speakers lined up who do consulting. We've got some people who do working on rivers as like an outfitter. We've got a person who, I think a company that makes river related things. So all sorts of private sector pathways that are available. And then, and lastly, I just want to say thank you again to all of our panelists and to all of you for joining today. This is recorded. I'm going to put this onto our RMS YouTube channel, so you can go check it out there. I encourage you to subscribe, and you'll stay up to date on all of our new videos that are posted, as well as I will be emailing this out to everyone who's registered for this. So you'll be getting a link to your email, and you can go find this or any of our other previous sessions on our YouTube channel. So thank you all again, and I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday.